shouting over the weekend. If you spent any time with me in the bar last night or in the karaoke, you probably saw me dancing on tables and screaming. So I'm not quite as loud maybe as I could be, so please bear with me on that.
I'm sure you'll be loud.
Oh, well, I tried. So, they invited us out, and we were incredibly grateful. We said, wow, this is awesome. We get the chance to come out to the UK, meet some of the UK fans, sign some books, and really just see a side of the fandom we wouldn't normally get the chance to see. And we kind of assumed that we were going to be doing Q&A. And then I actually think it was through a miscommunication, but the idea that somehow came up that we might be doing a presentation of some of the rarities and unusual pieces that we've sort of found over the years, and we haven't really had much of a place for. So I put together this brief, it's about 20 pages or so of artwork that for the most part either has never been published or has been published once in Japan, 1 or 2 decades ago. So this really isn't...
Everybody hear him?
I hope so. I hope this is of interest, and if not, then we can get to the Q&A right away. So
I'm bored already.
Based on the audience reaction. So we'll start with Generation 1. This piece right here is interesting. This is the very first piece of Japanese original Transformers artwork, as far as I'm aware. Comics Bomb is one of 2 publications in Japan from the 80s that was doing a lot of original material. And a lot of that stuff is collected in a book called Visual Works, but this one is actually from the preview issue in 1985. They got it a year later. So this artwork, it was unattributed, sadly, so we don't know who drew it, is the very first piece of Japanese original Transformers artwork, as far as I know, ever.
Jim, who's up in the upper right-hand corner there?
That would be Megatron.
In the first slide.
I don't know, I can't see it anymore. Another Japanese publication is called TV Magazine. That was the other big one besides the Comic Bomb. Now, I think at least the hardcore fandom is probably pretty familiar with the art that they published. There's a company called Studio Ox that published really detailed designs and illustrations. So I think people are familiar with that. There's a very talented artist named Megami Mon who did a lot. But what I don't think percolates up so much in the fandom is all the sort of kids stuff. And this one was, I think, particularly fun. This is obviously a Megatron maze.
And we did this maze on the plane. It's actually difficult.
It's actually not... I recommend taking a picture and trying to solve it, because you actually have to wind it like through the fusion cannon and then through the leg. It's not that hard. It says start in gold, by the way, and you got that really cute little chibi Optimus Prime there.
And you can email Jim, and Jim will send you the file.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
It's actually kind of difficult.
This is a fun one. This didn't wind up in the art books just because we didn't have room for it. It was kind of low quality. But this actually is the original scale document that they used when they were making and storyboarding the movie for how big the planets are. Now, it's all in Japanese, so I'll translate. But obviously this is Unicron and Cybertron. And this is Earth. So you can see that Earth in the cartoon company is actually much bigger than Cybertron, which kind of explains why Cybertron was orbiting around it in the Ultimate Doom. So you got Quintesson over here. Junkion, that's what that says. It's not a very good drawing, but Junkion, the 2 moons, and Litho. So you can see all the different sizes there. So I think that's kind of fun. Now, you guys are all probably familiar with background painted cells, but they don't actually hit the internet too often. I don't have too many, but this one was, I think, pretty cool. This is from the episode Chaos by Paul Davids, and it's Queen Mountain. I think it's just a really lovely piece. Not something people get the chance to see too often. And this art is actually more recent. This is from '94, but the Japanese Laserdisc box set. And again, a lot of the art from these Laserdiscs has been reproduced elsewhere, but this particular piece hasn't been. And as far as I know, it's only shown up in that one Laserdisc that's never shown up online. I'm sure now it'll be all over, but it's a pretty lovely RC. And likewise, this is a pretty cool Headmaster's collage from the Headmaster's Laserdisc box set. This was actually on the inside of the booklet that came with the Pioneer Laserdisc set, again, '94. Which brings us past Generation 1 to the Beast Wars, mostly the Japanese Beast Wars. Beast Wars second, they were on the planet Gaia. Now, again, hardcore fans will probably remember that Gaia recently was retconned into being Earth in the far future, which may be the case. But if you look at the actual continents from Gaia, they don't match up at all. So it could be continental drift over millions of years, or it could just be that they had no intention of making it Gaia, and that was a later addition. But you can see the details on the core of the planet, which I think are pretty cool. And this is just an odd piece. I mean, it's just a character model, but I thought it's a lot of fun. This is Transformers chess, if you wanted to know. You can see some of the pieces. Size, I don't know why they drew a human one, but it's a Transformers scale. And it looks like they have pegs, so maybe the pieces move around.
Do you know what the hand says?
I actually don't know what the hand says. Sorry, I don't know my kanji so well. Hiragana, katakana only. Beast Wars Neo. Beast Wars Neo, one of the big plot points was that Unicron was coming, and they didn't know how to fight it, so they mustered the Autobot Space Fleet, which is seen right here. I think it's a pretty cool one. It shows you, there's a whole bunch of different ship types in there. And when you go to the next slide, you can see that the capital ship is, of course, a Fortress Maximus style ship. And I don't think this was something that people picked up at the time, because I've gone through the wiki and I've looked at the forum, and I don't think anybody said, oh yeah, their capital ship is in fact some variation of Fortress Maximus. So, robots in the sky, car robots in the sky. So, Ai-chan, one of my favorite characters, Tai in the US and the UK, here's some early concept art for her. So, of course, she wound up being sort of a meter-maid thing, but really they were thinking maybe Angel, or if you go to the next slide, Maid. So, sort of Japanese sensibilities. Armada. This is a very standard character model. I just like it because it's sort of ridiculous. The toy can do this. You can combine the tidal wave toy with the Megatron toy, but of course they actually had to draw up the design for it. It's just as awkward in the design as it is in the toy. And here's a concept art for what Unicron might have looked like, very early on. And there's actually two. This one's nicely rendered, the big one, but if you see B, it's a little bit fainter. But they also had this other idea of a much longer, less traditional vision of Unicron. And this is actually what they actually did use. Unicron, of course, in Armada was disguised as one of Cybertron's moons. So this is him breaking out of Cybertron's moon. Energon, let's keep going with Unicron. So this is some early concept art of Unicron destroyed. And I think the fun part here, the especially fun part here for me, is the concept of the head destroyed, because of course we eventually got a toy that looks a lot like this sort of idea. So this is probably the origination of what that toy looks like. And animated. We actually don't have that much of animated because we had 444 pages of animated models, so most of it actually has come out. But I thought maybe we'd show you some of our original pitch documents. Because when we first conceived of the project, we were kind of thinking, we called it the ARC Animated, and we pitched it as a black and white book before we knew that we'd be able to get all the color stuff. So we sent this to IDW, and they actually approved the project before we changed it. But this was what...
And then we went crazy.
And then we went crazy and did color and added bios and all that. But this and the next slide, are sort of what we were originally thinking. As you can see, it's very much like the ARC. It's got that same sort of sensibility. It's a much less rich book, I think, than the Almanacs, but at the same time, it has this sort of charm too, and that you can really make out all the details. I like black and white. It's a fun medium. And so those are some of the sort of rare things that I've found over the years, and I haven't had much of a venue to share them with, so I hope you enjoyed them.
Questions about the ARCs or the Almanacs, so you just want to throw fruit at us, feel free to stand up and ask.
Just put your hand up and we'll come to your mic.
Yeah, the question and answer section.
No? Okay, thanks, good night.
Can I start myself, if that's okay? Over here, guys. Boom. I don't know if anybody else knows your history and stuff, but I'm interested in it. How did you get into this? Because from my point of view, you're like a couple of guys I've been talking to who happen to have access to this vault of goodies. I mean, where did you get into that? How did that come about?
Well, I've been telling people a lot lately, and repeating myself, Jim's a workaholic. He's one of these people that gets like an idea in his head and he can't stop until it's completed. And I was joking earlier that I can't even draw next to him because he keeps jumping up and down. So he kind of becomes this driving force for different things. He gets ideas and said that he wants to do fonts, so he'll do every font he can. And he kind of got into character models. And at the time, I was working at a museum as an art director, and he was getting all these character models that had that were degraded or just of low quality. He would come to me and say, "Hey, can you make this look nice? Can you kind of restore this?" So I started doing it for him, and one of us just said, this would be a great book. Actually, I think the website was originally on.
So we were thinking, oh, this could be an awesome website, but wouldn't it be even better if it was a book? So let's try, and we pitched IDW, and eventually they said yes. It took about a year, but we got it in the end.
And then once we got in front of the door, we just will not let it shut. So. Because we're fans before we're professionals, and it just becomes one of these things where as soon as we got the one book published, it's like, let's do this for the rest of our lives.
Well, the other thing is we did the arc, and it sold really, really well. And it's a black and white book that the two of us put together. I mean, if you think about 208 pages being put together by two guys. I mean, normally with a comic book, it's 22 pages, and it's a writer, an artist, a penciler, a colorist, maybe an inker, maybe a letterer. I mean, it's a lot of people to do 22 pages, and we're doing an order of magnitude larger. So, and the printing costs, especially on the art books, were low because they're all black and white. So I think IDW said, yes, let's keep doing this. So as long as you guys keep buying the books, I think we'll get to keep making them.
I've got a question for Dave over in the corner. He's going to know, what do you think the difference are between doing the art and doing the
I'm sorry, can you ask that question in English, please? I'm sorry, what was that?
He wants to know what's the difference in doing the almanac compared to doing the art.
Well, one of the major differences is, with all of the art books, this was artwork from 20, 30 years ago, and 25, and a lot of it was tracking it down. Jim went through Bob Vadinsky's basement. We've flown out to Japan to collect stuff. Whereas with the almanac, the material was readily available. Derek Wyatt and Marty Eisenberg worked down in Burbank, California, which was literally three miles away from our houses. So we were able to just go down there and pick up a lot of the material from them and deal with them directly. So a lot of it was just the research was a lot easier with the artists.
And what that let us do was, instead of spending hours and hours redrawing an image that had been Xerox 10 or 15 times, we could spend that time writing new material or drawing new material. Things like, most of the material in the almanacs are original. They're from, when I say original, they're from the Cartoon Network, or maybe from a company like Titan or IDW with their comic series. But we were working with other people's images, but because they were readily available to us, we didn't have to track them down and fix them up. We could draw, some of our own pieces, like the Garbage-O's and the Star Map and things like that, which people have responded very well to, which was very gratifying.
And because it's our third book, we felt a lot more comfortable with taking weird chances and going weird directions, because we felt like we already had a little bit of a fan base and they were going to forgive us if we got too far out of hand.
Well, and the other thing is
we did, but we wasn't like that.
But the other thing is that we were doing it in collaboration with people like Derek Wyatt, Marty Eisenberg, Matt Youngberg, the architects of the universe, Eric Cybernel. So if we put something in the book, and then we sent them our galleys, and they said, oh, well, I'm not sure Ultra Magnus would use this word, we take out the word. So it gave us more freedom in some ways to create, because we didn't have to worry, are we being untrue to the universe? Well, we knew we weren't, because the primary architects of the universe said we weren't. So that was, we couldn't do that really with G1 easily. For the most part, what's in our books in G1 is already there. The little tiny areas that we sort of expanded the universe was always because we had spoken to somebody, a writer or an artist, and said, oh, what would you have done? They said, oh, we would have done this. Oh, okay, well then we can name the jump counts. Things like that. So I think that's a pretty big difference.
We've got a question down here.
Hi, I was just wondering which era of the Transformers is your particular favourite and why exactly?
That's a tough one.
That's really hard. You know, when I was a kid, I was into G1, but I got out of G1 and I got sucked back in with Beast Wars. And Beast Wars is what really made me a fan. Uber fan. That holds a certain place in my heart. But animated, I'm going to say animated simply because I was able to contribute to it, and it feels like, you know, well, it feels like a part of it, and I appreciate it. And it also has such a unique charm to it. So I'm going to go with animated.
Yeah, I'm going to give a wishy-washy answer, which is funny because usually I'm very determined and straightforward. I really love animated a lot. I think it's certainly the best in quality in terms of a cell-based cartoon. I really love Beast Wars. I think Beast Wars is a fantastic universe. But the one that is my favorite, my personal favorite sort of year, is probably the Marvel Comics run of Generation 1. That's what I'm a big Simon Furman. He's not there, which is good. I can say this. So I'm a big Simon Furman fanboy. So to me, that's I like most different parts of the universe. I can find something I like, but that's probably my favorite era to revisit the period.
As far as toy collecting, though, I think we both tend to go with G1.
G1, yeah.
We go through everything, but mostly G1.
Yeah.
I've got a question over here.
Where?
Right. Obviously, you did the art, which was brilliant. The almanac again, which was
Thank you.
a masterpiece. What it was. What kind of other series would you like to possibly do a book on, like the almanac?
I'm sorry, I'm a little deaf. You're gonna yell.
What other kind of series or other continuity would you like to do a book on, like the almanac?
Would we like to do?
Within Transformers?
Yeah, I mean, it's not.
We've talked about everything. We've talked about everything from R&D to doing something with the Indepart trilogy. I mean, we'd like to do everything, actually.
Yeah. In terms of our personal preference, the book that I'd really like to make at some point would be the Arc Bestiary and really cover the Beast Wars character models in the black and white. Thank you. Thank you. I have a strong feeling that someday I will get the chance to do it, but right now it's not something that that fits in with the sort of larger strategies of the parent organizations. But there's plenty of, I mean, I love to play around with the sort of Exodus, War for Cybertron, the Prime Universe. I mean, obviously the movie universe is, you know, has expanded well beyond the two movies to be prequel novels and prequel comic series and expanded comic series and things like Nefarious and Tales of the Fallen and Reign of Starscream. So, I mean, it's actually a very, very rich universe. Again, sorry, wishy-washy answer, but we play around in almost anyone. I think the one I'm sure I could find a voice for it, but the one that I'd be pushing the least hard on would probably be the Unicron trilogy. Partially because it's difficult, because it's this weird mix of cell-based and CGI, and you can do one, you can do the other in a book, but to do both would be a challenge. I don't think insurmountable, but it would be a challenge.
I also agree.
I've got a question here.
Hi.
Hey.
Your Smart Almanac's got quite a few references to Iron Maiden. Obviously, you've got a good taste in music, but what made you decide to put that in?
I have two great passions in life, Transformers and Iron Maiden. I eat, breathe, and I've been driving him nuts because he introduced me to his friend Bish, and every time we get together, we just keep talking about Maiden and keep driving him away. It's just, I'm just an absolute fanatic of Iron Maiden music. You too? New album, Monday. By the way, their new album is coming out Monday, and I missed the release to be here, so I don't think that means anything to anybody, but it means a lot to me.
Hi.
Hi.
Just wondering, when you were doing the archive trawling for the Ark, what was the most remarkable thing that you found? Was there anything that made you go, oh, wow?
Obadinsky's gold.
The most remarkable thing. Well, you know, most of the most remarkable things I sort of put in the book. So now, in some ways, now they're old news because you've all seen them. But I thought finding the Nemesis was really cool. You know, finding the ship designs for the Decepticon ship from, yeah, you know the Nemesis, obviously. I forget who I'm talking to for a moment. I think that one I was really excited about. I really like finding from The More Than Meets the Eye, the Cybertronian mode vehicles for guys like Jazz and Laserbeak. I thought that was really, really cool. What about you?
I was happy with anything I didn't have to restore, honestly.
He was probably happiest with guys like Ratbat, because our Ratbat was terrible, and then Bob had a pristine version. You're like, oh, hey, Ratbat. So, I mean, not exciting to you guys.
I don't know where they came from, but I was always excited about any of the scales and stuff. I think we were missing Swoop or something.
Yeah, that was a funny story. We had the scale from season 2, and Swoop wasn't on it. You know, the scale guys, kind of like the planets that I showed you with the characters. And I didn't want to put him in because I didn't know how big he was supposed to be. And then later on, we actually found somebody who had one. I think it was on a lunchbox from Australia or something. Like, when we found it, we said, yeah, when we redo the collected volume, we'll drop Swoop in. And then we forgot. So Swoop still isn't in the scale.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. I should post it on the blog now that I've brought it to your attention. Because you don't notice these things. But once you notice a flaw, it's all you can see. Now you're going to like flip to the scale guide and be like, God damn, where the hell is Swoop? How big is he supposed to be?
More than what was exciting to find is, and it aggravates us, is we never found the fembots. And we're always looking for them. If anybody has the fembots, please come up to the stage. It's just one of the small holes that we haven't filled.
We have generally 2 criticisms about the arc. One criticism is it's in black and white, which, okay, fair enough, it's not for everybody's taste. I don't think it's a flaw because it's by design, but I can accept that.
But it's kind of funny because, you know, people here look at it and they go, oh, character models. But I show it to, like, my family and they're like, oh, you made a coloring book.
To which I say, it's actually a really good coloring book, because a coloring book is about 20 pages for about $5, or maybe about £3 or so. You know, ours is 200 pages for $20. That's actually really good value for your money, if you wanted a coloring book. Although now it would be like $200, so now it would be a terrible value for you.
So one complaint was...
So one was black and white, the other one is, you call it the complete arc, but there's no fembots. I said, oh, but we tried so hard. And if you read the introduction, which I suppose a lot of people don't, you know, we say this is every character that appeared in the U.S. television show, and it is. Every main toy character that appeared. So, you know,
plus some.
The one-off characters, yeah, plus a lot, but the one-off characters were a lot harder to find. So we didn't have them. And since a lot of it came to us via comic, characters that only showed up in the TV show, we had less inroads, fewer inroads to. So, I don't even remember the question, but I hope I answered it.
Also, I like all your pens.
I've got a question here by text. How do you feel about the wiki working through the book?
The wiki what through the book?
Working its way through the book.
Oh, it's kind of fun to watch. You know, I mean, it's in some ways it feels like, well, now it's official. You know, now that it's been documented, you know, categorized, you know, brief debriefs, numbered.
I find that if I forget something that I wrote in the book, instead of picking up the book, I'll go to the wiki and see what I wrote.
Unless it's for a reference, in which case we go to the annotated Allspark Almanac by one Chris McFeely. Chris, stand up and take a bow.
You know those movies with Nicolas Cage where he deciphers all the weird stuff in the back of the Declaration of Independence? That's what Chris does for us.
Yeah. We kind of refer to him as like the third member of the team. You know, we write the book and then we wait 11 days and then all the references come out on the internet. So,
but the wiki is a great resource for us. So we have a love for the wiki. Seeing our stuff slowly appear throughout the wiki just really gives us a sense of pride. And to be honest with you, we kind of think it's fun when there's a little bit of conflict between them.
Yeah, we do get the occasional huge flame wars over the stuff we wrote, which we mostly try to stay out of. Mostly. We don't always succeed.
You mentioned conflict there. I've got to ask you about a little conflict that came about earlier. I had this argument with Derek. Alignment? Canon?
I don't see...
What do you think?
Yeah, well, what do you think?
I think it's canon enough.
That's a good answer. I like that. Canon enough. What I am going to say is, this isn't a cop-out. This is genuine. In fact, people can probably back me up on this. Transformers is a shared universe. I mean, literally hundreds of creators have had a hand in, making the characters, the toys, the comics, the books, the coloring books. I mean, there's so many people playing with it that, in some ways, I feel like the creators, including ourselves, we don't own it. So once the book's in print, I kind of feel like authorial intent should be sort of minimized. So I don't like to comment on my own stuff because I feel like people give it more weight than they should. I kind of feel like my opinion about what the words mean, in some ways, is no more valid than Chris's or yours or anybody else's. So I don't like to say what I meant when I wrote something, which is why Bill asked, well, what do you think? I think that's.
We'll present the material, and if you say, oh, well, we're going to interpret it this way, well, you're the fandom. You go ahead and interpret it that way.
And sometimes
I could offer my opinion and say, yeah, I think this should be that way, I think it should be that way, and that's why I wrote it, and that's why I drew it, and that's why I put it there. But it's really a matter of how you perceive it.
It's just like in the way a song can mean a different thing to different people.
Exactly.
Well, let me say this. It's not an answer to your question, but I really like Alignment, and I think it's a really good story. So, but then again, as I said, Simon Furman fanboy, so that's probably not a huge surprise.
So basically, the fandom accepts it, and the fandom accepts it. They know.
I've got a question over here.
Hiya. I'd like to know, in your opinion, where do you think Beast Wars fits into the animated universe?
Okay, we haven't really written about this, so I can feel free to answer. I think that if there's a Beast Wars in the animated universe, it's probably in the future, and it'll probably play out fairly differently than it did in the Beast Wars that we know from television, or the various comic adaptations.
That's just our opinion.
But again, if I had to guess, I'd say that's probably, eventually they probably would have some sort of, I mean, it does seem like Black Arachne is starting to accumulate a Predacon army. So presumably that trend would continue. But where it would go, hard to say.
Next question.
Any questions for Chris?
Miss McFeely,
Ms. McFeely, please take the stage.
what do the numbers mean in the...
Please take the stage, Ms. McFeely. Excuse me one moment, we have to get Chris this. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris McFeely, the third member of our... You can see his head didn't actually explode. I'm sorry, your question?
In the Osborne Almanac, there's a series of numbers, plus and symbols. What do they mean?
I haven't figured it out yet.
What do you mean you haven't figured it out?
They tell me it's something to do with comics. If anybody can figure that one out, it's the Alternity Today newspaper section, stock ticker, numbers, something to do with comics. Somebody figure it out. I am so far removed from that book at the minute. I can't face looking at it again. Solid work. I spent billable hours at work annotating that book instead of doing my job.
Chris, when you figure out the numbers, you're going to hit yourself in the head. You're going to hit yourself in the head.
I'm sure it's probably really obvious, but I haven't been able to face up to looking for it.
Oh, another question.
What's been your favourite part of doing both books? What have you enjoyed most? Obviously, it's a Transformers book and your Transformers. What's been kind of your driving point, your favourite part of doing each of the books?
Well, my favorite part from doing either of the books, doing the art books, my favorite part is just kind of when I have a situation like when I meet people like Derek White, he says, "Oh yeah, I have a copy of your book," or I use it as reference, and I go, "Oh, that's I'm away."
If you need me back,
It's just nice to know that we're restoring artwork that was lost and that people are actually use it, especially people in the professional.
Yeah, let me elaborate on that. I think that's definitely a huge, and we get very grateful when, I mean, it's always nice when anybody comes up to you and says that they like your work, but when when either a pro artist or an aspiring fan artist comes up to us and says, we really like your book because we use it for reference, that feels really great, because one of the sort of goals I had in the back of my mind was that I really liked, keep in mind the time frame when we started to put this together. It was during like the latter part of the Dreamwave era. So there was this very toy-based movement in design characters because that's what reference was available. So you had things like Prowl with car details on the inside of the store, which is pretty cool. I don't mind it. But I've always really liked the Garry style from the old Marvel days. So when I was kind of hoping when the book came out, maybe more artists would start to draw in that old style, and I think that we've seen a little bit of that. I know that people like Guido Guidi and Marcelo Monterri use it for reference with their material, and that's been really cool for me, because it was a goal and we sort of achieved it.
As far as the best part of putting the almanacs together, it's been fan response. People have embraced it, and they flew us to England, to sign autographs. I mean, that's overwhelming. So it really has just been how well received it is, and how much feedback we got. We haven't really had any complaints about it.
Yeah, aside from a few niggling details about stuff that's hidden in the margins.
And you guys all know that every book you put out, there's nothing but complaints about. So it's kind of flattering how well it's been received.
It's so rare when something comes out and virtually everybody likes it. But the thing that I've enjoyed the most is getting the chance to go behind the scenes, pull back the curtain and see the wizard, for what he really is. Especially with the second book, I got the chance to work really closely with, so many people. Like I got the chance to talk to Sebastian Evans, the composer. I got the chance to talk to some of the sound guys.
It put us in a position where we could be friends with Simon Furman. And that's pretty cool.
That's nice too. But I got the chance to speak to 10 of the voice actors, including all 8 members of the main cast, as well as Phil Lamar and Townsend Coleman, who were the single most frequently recurring guest actors. So that was really gratifying. But I think that's what I like most. Just seeing how the sausage is made and then documenting it and sharing it with you guys.
I've got a question here by text if anybody else has. What gave you that idea of writing the almanac in character?
I love Sorry, and I whatever reason, kept writing like an So,
go figure.
So I had this brilliant idea to just do the whole book narrated by Sorry. And I approached him with it, and he said, "That's nuts. We're not going to do that." And
we sort of planted this seed.
And we were looking. We got to the point where we didn't want to do another arc. We wanted to do something unique. We're saying, well, if we do episode guides are kind of boring. Nobody ever, people have already seen the episode.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you present this in a new way?
The trouble with an episode guide is we're basically pitching. I mean, we want our books to be enjoyable by everyone, by a kid, by a casual fan, by a hardcore fan. But realistically, mostly the books are available in comic shops. They're $20, so they're mostly going to wind up in the hands of hardcore fans. And the hardcore fans, most of them, we think, have already seen the episodes. And if they haven't, they're probably not going to buy the book. So, but we still felt like we wanted to do an episode guide, partially because it felt like the thing to do, partially because we had so many episode-specific models and backgrounds that we wanted to include them, but outside of the context of the episode, they didn't really make much sense.
Yeah, and quite frankly, a bunch of backgrounds with a little bit of text, it gets to be a little daunting when you're reading it.
It's hard to imagine 400 pages of that.
So I kept coming back with this idea, let's do Sorry narrated, let's do Sorry narrated. He just kept blowing me off. Until eventually he turned around and said, Sentinel can narrate this.
I love Sentinel Prime.
And he's very good at pretending he's Sentinel Prime. So
I'm very good at playing the pompous ass. Go figure.
So he wrote up something with, as Sentinel said it, as in Sentinel's words, and I wrote up something as if Sorry said it. And we just kind of kept going with it, and it just evolved into, okay, who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, well, this person should, narrate this, and this person should narrate that.
Who has the most interesting perspective on these events, or on this character? So it let us, and the other thing about writing the book in universe is that whenever you talk about something, you're also talking about yourself. So if I start talking about Bill, you learn about Bill, but you also learn something about me based on the sort of the way I present it. So by doing it in universe, we actually, in some ways, get to double dip and convey twice as much information, or information maybe twice as efficient.
And it also just became terribly fun for us. And I ride a motorcycle through Los Angeles traffic, and I'd be on my bike, yelling as Lovenut, writing it in my head, and stopping the traffic lights and what have you, go, kneel before Megatron, and people would be looking at me like I was out of my mind. So it kind of just became this.
Like you were out of your mind?
Yeah, like it was out of my mind.
You're saying you're not.
So I'd get home and I'd be excited about it. So it kind of helped nourish the book.
I've got a question from one of the shy retirement fans.
Yeah, he's very shy.
Did you beat up Mike Tyson?
You're not gonna, do I have to tell a story? Okay. I did not beat up Mike Tyson. I just simply shoved him a little bit. It's a long story. I'm not going to tell here because I'm afraid he's going to come back.
The short answer is yes. The long answer is no. Way in the back.
We got a question right down here in the far reaches.
Thank you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I wondered if you might put it into print.
If we can put it on what?
Into book print.
There might be copyright issues with that. I'm glad to be able to show it to you. I'm sure people took pictures, but I'm not sure if I actually would be sort of allowed to print it up and share it. I mean, I might be able to put it on the web, maybe.
I'm sure if you look around the internet, you'll see people's pictures posted. If you can put it on his blog, keep checking his blog. If he can get it up there, he'll get it up there, I'm sure.
Boltax.blogspot.com. You're welcome.
Or just Google Jim Sorenson, it'll come up. You were the billionaire in Utah, right?
There are lots of semi-famous Jim Sorensons. There's a Utah billionaire who passed away recently, and there's a guy who owns a company, or the president of a company called Horny Goat Brewing Co. So I'm in good company.
I've got a question. What's your favourite memories from writing either the almanac or the art?
Favorite memory? Okay, I got one, and Bill will think while I'm doing this. I think my favorite memory of it was being on the phone with Townsend Coleman and him finishing the interview, basically, and getting everything I needed to know about animated. And then at the end saying, oh, by the way, I'm a really big fan of your work, especially Michelangelo and the Tick. And then he went into this 20-minute conversation, like, not really interviewing, it was more or less off the record. Not off the record, but it wasn't the professional work I was working on, about the merits of the Tick. And he was so excited. He's like, yeah, I would. And I actually, the Moon-Based podcast also interviewed him, and some of this came up. And he was talking about how he would read the Tick's rant at the end of the episode, and even though he normally likes to memorize his lines ahead of time, or at least know what they are, those he would skip because he'd be so excited to get to them, and even the Tick doesn't know what they're going to be at the end. It just sort of flows out of his mouth. So that was a real highlight of working on the books. I love the Tick, so it was great to talk to him.
Favorite memory? Part of my favorite memory is just being able to go down to Cartoon Network and, him and Derek would talk Transformers way over my head. And I would just sit on the floor and go through what was artwork from the show. And we'd be there late at night doing that. That was always a lot of fun. We do a lot of brainstorming over breakfast and going swimming in Jim's pool. So a lot of that is what I remember. But I think the best thing that I can remember happening to me was I was at the airport, and it's a couple of weeks after BotCon, so that's probably why this happened. And I was at the airport, and some woman came over to me and said, I'm sorry, my son thinks he knows you from the Transformers. And I'm like, really? I got noticed? And I was just so flattered. I was drawing a picture, I guess.
Another question for our panel?
I just wanted to know, since the movies have been made, is there a new surge of interest in the books and the comics?
I think because the movies were made, we have a career. Because I think at the time the first movie was being made was when we approached IDW and said we had this idea for our first book. And I think they were looking for new product to put on the shelves. So I think it's certainly helped us get a career. I don't know how well it helped comic books in general.
It's hard to say, but we sold out of the Ark, which came out in 2007 when the first movie came out, and we sold out of the Allspark Almanac, which came out in 2009, when the second one came out. And the Arc 2 is the only one of our books still in print, which might even include the All-Star Almanac 2.
Somebody told me it was out of print this morning.
What?
Somebody told me it was out of print this
Well,
morning.
it was in print as of 2 weeks ago, and that came out in 2008, in the year between the movies. So I'd say there's definitely a rising tide lifts all ships. So yes, I think there's that impact. And if there's no more questions,
Another question? Would you want to do one on the movieverse as well?
Oh, yes, because there's probably a lot of money in there. Honestly, I always make the jokes. If they wanted us to do My Little Pony, we do My Little Pony. But
we're not allowed to talk about the My Little Pony project.
That's right. I'm sorry.
You guys didn't hear that. I don't want to see that on the web.
But anything within Transformers we'd love to do. But yeah, we have ideas for everything. So the movie stuff, certainly, we'd love to go in and be able to connect a couple of dots.
Yeah, well, and as I was saying, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, connect the dots, because there's actually quite a lot in the movieverse. So I think it'd be fun to kind of do, not to the same extent we did with animated, but to kind of say, all right, let's really look at every piece of it and see, maybe there are parts that fit together that nobody's really thought of before. So, yeah, I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to work with you.
Although, of course, the challenge with the movieverse is, I really am interested in the comic and the prose side of things. So, and probably the most marketable part is the live action. So you do have to find a way to
I'm
integrate.
interested in the Megan Fox edit.
Well, I'm sure you are. But that means we have to integrate visually the photos of props and actors and stills with drawings from comics and designs, and even do a prose book, which I'm not exactly sure how I do. Maybe excerpts of text. And when we get upstaged by kids, I think that's probably a good sign that we should start moving on. So I'm going to say thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Class.